Thank you.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. This is great. We've had some really good conversations, so we'll get right to it because we want everyone to be able to have all of their roundtable time, too. So, but just quickly introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Bill, and just go right down the line, and then we'll get right to it.
Sounds good. Bill Veltre. I'm the Executive Vice President and Head of Media at Deerfield Group, agency located in Philadelphia. Prior to my time at Deerfield, I was on the client side for 5 years at BMS and AbbVie and Allergan. I've been a product lead, brought products to market. And then prior to that, spent most of my time at parent companies on the media side, so Publicis as well as WPP.
Hi, I'm Analesa Smith. I am in the Customer Experience and Innovation Group at Alnylam. We are the leading RNAi therapeutic pharma company. So my background is actually in more of consumer and B2B. I spent most of my career, about 25 years on the agency side, not in pharma. So a couple years ago, made the shift to Alnylam and kind of bringing a different perspective, from, not really knowing this world. So I'm actually learning a lot today with everybody. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Myles, Lawless. I'm at Corcept Therapeutics. I lead the digital and omnichannel capabilities across the organization, both from a franchise and enterprise level. Been in the industry for 20 plus years. That's right, I started when I was 10. And research informatics, and then the second half of my career has been purely in the commercial space for both oncology, endocrinology, cell and gene therapies.
Awesome. So you guys are definitely the people to go to for all this. So, we heard Shazad talking about how consumers are much more knowledgeable. They're learning more about their diagnosis, what they're doing, and taking control of their health. Also, on the other side of it, HCPs, or whatever we decide we want to call them, or HPC, sorry, they are seeing more access to what consumers are seeing from marketing. They're on social media. So how has that really brought you to need to evolve your marketing strategy from maybe what was considered traditional pharma and health marketing? And Myles, why don't we start talking with you?
Sure. So from a traditional point of view, we sort of all have grown up as marketers thinking about the HCP side of things and what we need to do, and that audience, and then the patient side of things and what we need to do. And while that's good to be thinking about sort of segmentations and targeting and messages and campaigns, et cetera, the challenge with that model is that as people, and we have to sort of remind ourselves that HCPs and patients are people too, and they can all consume information. So the key is in the evolution has been looking at what is really the problem that you're trying to solve for those audiences, and then how do you bring that collective campaign approach across an enterprise to think about how best you can solve the problem. So if you think about the evolution over time, we've seen more and more patients are getting information first and faster in many cases than the HCPs. We just heard that in the previous session. So the model has changed without sort of creating this adversarial relationship where we're trying to create a sense of urgency on the patient side to get them to have a conversation with the doctor, but yet we don't want to put the doctor in a position where they don't feel they have the right information at the right time to help that patient, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And so as we evolve over time, it's really about getting the information into the right hands at the right time.
Well, Analesa, I want to, because you were specifically brought in to sort of get rid of those silos and kind of make it a more holistic marketing strategy. And I know it's in the works, but really, what are you finding that's been the most important thing that you've had to do to adjust?
Yeah, I guess I would say that, obviously in the best case scenario, HCPs and patients are getting a unified message. When they show up and get together, they can have a productive conversation because they've each, received those messages in alignment, but obviously that's not always the case. I think, unified, at the end of the day, on our end as marketers and to do that targeting, the unified data needs to happen before we can have a unified message. So to get to that unified data, I think that's taking time to build the foundations in-house, build out the platforms, the CDPs, whether it's LiveRamp or whoever we're bringing in-house to make sure we can come up with these custom segments to unify that data, so then we can use it in the marketplace to target. And then the other side of that is breaking down the silos, organizationally. I think, the people, process, and platforms? Is that the 3 Ps that are always talked about in marketing? It's the process and the people. So, in Alnylam, I'm more in a global group that, supports the different products and regions, but within all of our brands and products, we're sort of bringing in omnichannel marketing teams. So that team, isn't siloed between HCP and patient. That group is supposed to kind of unify those experiences. So I think it's the combination of unifying the unification of the data and then the people.
Well, and you talk about, obviously, the data, and data is so important to make it more efficient, to make you more knowledgeable, but in pharma and health, data isn't always easy to get. There's lots of regulations and restrictions. So Bill, I want to start with you. How are you what are you doing to really collect that data? And is it more on the consumer side, the HCP side? Like, how are you doing that?
So you just said the bad word, omnichannel, so we'll play on that, right? So I think it's omni-customer at this point in our ability to look at both HCP and consumer data with the same type of lens, and it comes from the same types of interactions. So within the media pathways, if you think about the friction points or the moments in time within a journey, there's data that's being collected every single time someone is engaging with some type of content or an advertising unit. That data, I think, has to be collected and sorted, and every single condition is different. And I sometimes I think we generalize or overgeneralize the way that we go to market and utilize data. But at the end of the day, the way that individuals are consuming content and interacting with advertising units is different by condition, and data is going to look different by condition, and sometimes we have to dig a little bit more granularly, and I think once we pull that apart, the insights, not observations, insights that we actually can extract from it are going to be very unique by that individual condition. The way that we're collecting it, from being in-house at the client for a while, I think everyone is going to agree with this. No one's doing it well, right? It's a mess everywhere. I mean, let's just be frank. And I also think because it is kind of a mess, people believe that they're doing it well in one channel, but maybe not in all channels. So omni-channel really doesn't exist either. So at the end of the day, data is where we all want to go. I think it's figuring out a better way to make clean data accessible to marketers, agencies, and partners. And we all need to align on that lexicon, because what's happened in our industry, again, that overgeneralization has made data very messy. So I think it's cleaning it up over the next couple of years that's really going to help us propel forward and provide better impact.
Yeah, maybe if I could jump on that, because I think that's a great point. I think as marketers, we are all creative, and so we try to find a creative solution for where there may or may not necessarily be a problem. And I think we need to get back to first principles. And so thinking about approaching how you're going to unify these audiences, one of the first things you have to think about is a hamburger. Think about what is the end-to-end experience at the top that you're trying to create. What are the systems and architectures that you need to put in place at the bottom of that hamburger? And then what is the data that needs to be in between those to make it actually actionable? And when we talk about data, we have to acknowledge that not all data is created equal. We really need to be thinking about data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And that's where we really need to get to, is this beyond contextual, beyond meaning, into the insightful component of what we're trying to accomplish. And the other thing I would say, and then I'll get off the soapbox, I think what we also talk a lot about as marketers is we talk about creating a seamless experience. That's a fallacy. We're not trying to create a seamless experience. I mean, if you have a really nice suit or a really nice dress, there are seams in it, right? If you want to make something personal, it needs to have seams. What we're really talking about is frictionless experiences. So again, that gets back to the data is at the core of everything you do, And as marketers, we need to pivot away from being sort of output-focused to being outcome-focused. And if we do that, then the campaigns will become better, then the campaigns will become unified, then we'll solve the problems that we're trying to help on the HCP side and on the patient side.
Well, I want to get in more into the channels and that omni-channel kind of mix, but Annalise, I want to jump on something you said in an earlier conversation when we were all prepping, and it kind of adds to what Myles was just saying in terms of you were talking about audience quality and why is everyone so focused on that. And you really went into looking at that granular, which again, Bill was talking about that granular data, because again, it all starts with the data. So where are you getting that best data? Are you following the HCP path? And then does that help you with consumers, or is it one separate from the other? Like, what's making it so you can really get that data that you need in order to move forward the way both of them were just talking about?
Yeah, I think on the patient and the HCP side, the challenges of sort of the data and the targeting and sort of what we can, with the privacy on the patient side, where we have just many more limitations. And you know, not coming from pharma, when I first joined, this is a little bit of that story I think I shared. You know, I was one of the first sort of, I think, media meetings I was in. Everyone was talking about audience quality. And it took me a few minutes to realize that, like, in this space, whereas like in every other industry, I think you know exactly who you want to target. You create those first-party lists or third-party data, and you go out and, you know, 100% of whatever of your impressions are reaching that audience. And then in this space, it's like, no, you have to actually, you know exactly who you want to reach. Then you have to scramble up all the data, de-identify it, and then go out and maybe reach some of them. So then I'm like, oh, okay, so audience quality is just to be like, did we reach our intended audience? And for our awareness campaigns, you know, we're looking at that because I think that is one of the key metrics for a lot of our patient awareness campaigns is we want to get the message in front of patients, and we want to make sure we're reaching the people that are most, you know, misdiagnosed or most likely to have this condition. And then tying that to HCP, you know, I think in the best case scenario is using platforms and partners where then, you know, hopefully if you're tagging your website and then you can get the list of NPIs for the HCPs to target them and be like, hey, like now you know this group of HCPs that one of their patients have visited your site. So that can really help inform what you're going to do with that NPI target list. And that was the other flip side of like this. And I'm like, on the other hand, then when I was learning more about targeting HCPs, I was like, oh my gosh, like you can target them more than like any other segment. You know their names, where they work.
Well, yeah,
like,
you
so
have
then
the
crazy
data.
side on that side, I was like, wow, it's like two complete opposite challenges.
Well, I want to turn this back to you, Bill, in the sense of when you're talking that more granular, as Annalisa just said, you know everything about the HCP side, but it's more the privacy issues that you're not necessarily knowing the patient. And how are you looking, so maybe that you're doing some sort of modeling, you know, patient modeling, but then there's a lot of stages in that patient's span of when they were using the medication or whatever it may be. So talk about that. How do you then take whatever you're learning from, as Annalisa just said, what you're learning from the HCP in terms of maybe they visited or they went into and asked about it, but also looking at previous customers. How do you predict what they're going to be doing next?
Sure. So, you know, there is no data but patient data at the end of the day, and looking and making sure you understand who your patient segment is starts from the marketing team, and there's a lot of time and effort and money that's put into profiling to understand who is that ideal patient, and marketers sometimes are at a disadvantage because they don't understand data. So they're marketers. So they struggle to understand the layering of data. And there's a lot of different sources, and some are good and some are bad. And I think as a collective industry, we know that. What we are trying to do, though, is produce the best patient profile possible that builds on your creative patient profile. So you go out the gate and you understand that your patient is someone who is potentially diagnosed, but do you realize that there's J codes and CPT codes that you could be layering on top of that? You might be able to start to layer on psychographic information from different sources. And then from a modeling perspective, it's testing and learning, right? Not all data sources are created equal, so it's trying to understand which ones are going to give you the best audience quality. And spending a lot of time with third-party measurement partners, as I have in my career, some do it better than others, and being able to extract exactly where that quality is coming from, but it does require you to kind of test and also play. You know, a lot of brands are very conservative, and unfortunately what ends up happening is they don't get to experience the plethora of data that is available to them. So it's being able to really have, quote unquote, an omni-channel plan, as many channels as possible, activating in a lot of different partners. All the partners in the room are really happy to hear that because they want more IOs. But ultimately, being able to activate in a lot of places in order to test and learn to see where the quality is really coming from. But out the gate, I don't think that any one marketer is saying like, oh, it's going to be this data set and it's going to be this activity that's going to drive the biggest impact. It's really about being able to test and learn and put a lot of things into market.
Well, and I want to, and this, I'll go to you, Myles, I'm sorry, I'm looking there. Myles, when you're talking, again, it's not maybe that seamless, but frictionless, but how are you, and let's talk layering, you know, in terms of we still want to somehow be more efficient and be able to reach consumers and reach HCPs. So where are you getting that in terms of what type of engagement or what channels, like how are the channels, even if they're not seamless, how are they one impacting the next to make it more frictionless or to make them move on their journey?
Yeah, not to get too nerdy for a second, but perhaps I will. I mean, for me, it's about really approaching it from sort of network diagramming perspective. So understanding sort of pathways and the nodal connective. So in marketing terms, it's about really understanding where your audience is, what is your hypothesis about the relevant channels. Not all channels will be relevant, so omnichannel is not necessarily every channel. But understanding then from that point where to go. So one approach that I've taken multiple times in my career is looking at it from a hub and spoke. So you've got a website where you're creating your own properties with all of your resources for both HCPs and patients. That's great, but it's not a field of dreams. You actually have to drive to it. So that's where you work with your third-party partners to develop those channels, whether it be paid social, direct, programmatic, connective TV, whatever those channels are, but understanding what is the behavior that you're trying to influence on that channel. How does that channel connect to the behavior that you're trying to enact? So I'll give you one very specific example that kind of complements both sides of the audiences. So when we look at creating a point of care on the patient side, we're looking at partnerships where we can make sure that we get the pre, during, and post interactions with the patient side of things, and then how do we marry that up on the HCP side at those targeted institutions that we're working with from an electronic health records point of view, and marry those campaigns together so that we don't get to a situation where we heard previously about the patient is coming in with the information first, the doctor doesn't have time to digest it, it's trying to figure it out on the fly. So that's one of the main things that we focus on. How do you look across those end-to-end experiences, and what are the things that you're trying to do to move the needle? And the key behind all of that, obviously, is data, but also aligning the data to the problem that you're trying to solve. So what are you doing to define success, and how do you measure success? And that gets to Bill's point, which is really about the test and learn. As marketers, we have to become, so as data scientists and computer nerds, we are comfortable 100% of the time, day in, day out, testing and learning and failing fast and failing forward. As marketers in this industry, we're not as comfortable with that. And that's where we have to do. So for the omnichannel and the digital marketing folks, it's about bringing that understanding and creating that safe space to test and learn. And that's where you get the key insights.
Well, and I want to, and this, before we open it up to everyone else, but jumping on that, because as you said, there's really not one KPI. There's certain success stories depending on the channel and depending on what the goal is. But so Analesa, you were brought in to sort of make this a more holistic experience for your brand. What are you testing out? Or what are you even, I want to ask all of you, what are you looking forward to, like near future, not next year or even, but just something that you're ready to test on, or you've had some good results and you want to pursue more? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
I think in terms of, we have done a lot of CTV this year, so on our patient side, we don't have massive budgets, so we're not on linear national TV. So we've been testing out various segments on the patient side for CTV. So I think, that has been successful, continuing that, trying to merge the two CTV, awareness with, the HCP side in terms of, figuring out, the patient and connecting that we're trying to do. And I would say the other part is, I think when we talk about, omnichannel and being in the right audience, the right time, right channel, right message.
Hear that all the time.
Right. So those 4 things are all really important. But I mean, for this industry, it seems like the right content and getting enough content and enough messaging out there, it just takes time, to get that through, all of the reviews and get that out there. So to me, some of the things I'm excited about to test more is also the dynamic kind of creative and just kind of getting different messages out there, coming up with ways where we don't have to get approvals across a lot of messages and a lot of creative at the same time in order to do that. And it's not easy, honestly. In other industries, it's so much easier. You can just get dynamic creative out there and you can have a new message for everybody. And I think it's hard because the expectations of consumers out there is personalization. It is all fresh content based on their needs and the brand giving them that value. But, I think we're a little bit more limited in terms of creating content on the fly. We can't do that. So dynamic creative, how AI is going to hopefully, speed up all of the creative processes. So I think the content side, I'm most excited about sort of continuing the testing in that space.
Did you guys have anything to add differently?
My perspective is, coming into this role at Deerfield is looking at providing streamlined and, a lot of savings to budget. I feel like we overspend in pharma and we think that that is the norm. And there's a lot more efficient ways to be able to utilize the data and actually put it into action. We've been talking about it for so many years. Now it's the time to actually act on it. With the, lack now of, worrying about the cookieless future, I think we have a lot of opportunities to capitalize on the data that we have at our fingertips and start making every dollar act like $5 because budgets aren't growing, they're shrinking, and there's a lot less of the blockbuster brands and a lot more rare brands that are coming to market that don't have a lot of money. So it's really our responsibility to, patients to make dollars work harder so they can get the access to the medicines that they need.
Yeah, and I think if you step out of the macro, which is omnichannel, which I know it's in my title, and I'm not saying it's not important, but when you step out of it and you sort of get into the micro view of things, I think what's key is to understand, first of all, the journeys are not truly linear, although that's how we've been raised as marketers, right? We create HCP and patient journeys that are linear. They're not truly linear. Then when you're thinking about how you promote within those spaces, if you take that linear approach, that's where you fall into the budget overruns and the inefficiencies. For me, what I get really excited about is understanding, taking that nonlinear approach about what are the channels and a hypothesis approach that you think are going to make sense, test and learn, define what the success measure is, measure the success, and if it's successful, great. If it fails, celebrate that failure because then that drives the efficiency. And then go after the non-sexy. I would say paid search, we don't talk a lot about paid search, but paid search is non-sexy sexy. Because what paid search will do for you is it will help you understand your audience much better than you will understand because you will have direct access to what they're accessing on, and then you can define that, figure it out, and then we get into, which is really super sexy, which is machine learning, AKA AI. Right, so we, at least those of us who have been in a technology background, know machine learning is not new. So we really have to be thinking about next best action. So if we create modular content, which we can do, if you define your message map, create your modular content, understand that content is consumed by us all in a snackable way, so you can be breaking your content down and placing it in those channels to test and learn, do your A/B or your multivariant, and you will be surprised at how much insights you will glean. And I think we just have to embrace, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Awesome. Any questions from the crowd?
We have time for only one question, so no pressure.
Better be a good one.
Ilona Ritok from Spectrum Science. You talked a lot about audience insights and, HCP physicians or patients' insights. Can you talk a little bit more about how insights about one audience, or even give examples of insights about one audience inform or change strategies about the other audience?
I can give you a quick example. I think that was mentioned earlier, like in exam room, recordings that are done by like a company like Verilog. What's really interesting is when you hear a patient talk about a condition, it's very different than the way marketers go to market with their marketing materials. So a way that I've used it in the past is watching, a migraine patient talk about migraine very differently, and being able to educate the physician on the things that they're going to hear. And we actually changed our go-to-market strategy from an IVA perspective to include patient verbatims from things that we have heard. So pounding in my head, nails on a chalkboard, all of these like very, very curious, like thought-driving comments, and we actually were able to educate physicians on what they're going to hear that's a little bit different than just, unilateral pain and, front lobe pain. Like those types of things are all very interesting, but not the way that patients are coming to the exam room.
And I would say from a patient perspective, I'll give you an example. So we created a simple online quiz about our understanding of a disease that we were trying to drive education on, based on all of the research and all that good stuff that we all know and do. And then we put it out there, and then we captured the data on how people actually defined it within that quiz, and we were surprised at the answers. We took the learnings from those answers to completely change the campaign approach. We tied that to our paid social strategy, which then had a clear call to action to enroll in our CRM program. And we saw a 300% increase in enrollments in that very small test and learn. We then took that approach into the HCP side of things and said, okay, well, this is our understanding. Let's see what that audience thinks about it. So it's about sometimes taking an approach about, yes, we have to understand, this was mentioned earlier today, doing your research and understanding your audiences before you go out and do your creatives and all those things is an appropriate approach to take, but allow yourself the wiggle room to test and learn through the process.
All right. Well, you guys were awesome. Thank you so much. Give a big hand for Myles, Analesa, and Phil, please.